Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Thinking Outside the Longbox. As always, I am Gabe, your intrepid host and I guess person that does interviews. So with me today is Elisa Lasowski. I'm thinking I did that pretty good. And we are, of course, talking to her about being the one of the female leads, because this movie has a lot of female leads, of Blood Machines, which is available on Shudder, which we talked about on the show, I want to say about 3 weeks ago now. So, Elisa, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
The first thing I have to say, I absolutely love this movie. This is like my favorite movie so far of the year. So,
Cool, amazing.
so uh, what I'd really like to get started with is, what was the process like, getting involved with Seth Eicherman and with this movie? Because it seems like it was kind of all over the place, with it being a Kickstarter and kind of how he just kind of put everything together. So what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I got cast in a fairly conventional way, by a casting director that I know, and she sort of said, I think you'd be right for the project. I think maybe the producers had seen some of my work before or something, but then I met with the director's Skype meeting, and they sent me the script, and they had also made a sort of kind of like it was a bit of like a visual map of what the film would be like, of this kind of animated sort of a kind of design or whatever. So I had an idea of, because so much of it is obviously, as you know, like a visual experience, and there's really only so much you're prepared for, like there's only so much of this you can actually have on paper, so they sort of like sent me a kind of almost like a animatic kind of like comic type of animated sketch, let's say, of the film. And then they sent me the script, and I told the director this, but at first I was like, what what the hell is this about? Like, it's hard to get my head around, and there's so much kind of symbolism in it, and but I just, something about them as well as directors, and we just had a really good chat, and I was like, okay, let's go. Sometimes you just have to kind of take a risk, and well, not even take a risk, but you just have to go with your instincts. And I think with a piece that is so visual and so much of it exists in their head, and even when we're actually shooting, because we had some beautiful sets, but it's also a lot of green screen, and you kind of have to put faith in them, and I just felt that they were really great guys, and sometimes you just go with your feelings. So yeah, and it wasn't a mistake.
So when I interviewed Anders, he
Yeah.
talked a lot about the directors, but
Yeah.
I thought it was just like a language thing, and he was saying it incorrectly. He never like really articulated that it was two people, and so until now, I was under the impression that Seth Eicherman is one person, and then
It's
you described it as two and them, and like really expanded that.
Yeah.
I did not know that's two people. Are they just a two director team, or how did that work? I've never heard of
Yeah.
two people being a directors except for the Wachowskis. So
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are some directors that work as duos. Like, it's not. It does. There's the Coen brothers, or there's this, or the. It does exist. But I guess what's unusual is that they've just chosen one name, so you could indeed think that it's just the one person. But I never asked them why they did that. I guess it's just they decided to create an alter ego or whatever. Like, and I think when we worked, I think it was, they very much worked together at every step of the process. I think they've known each other for a long time. And Raphael was more kind of on set with us, directing the actors a little bit more. And then Savitri was very much the one who's kind of like the head of the what do you call it? The sort of he was the one kind of directing our movement according to all the special effects that they were going to add on top. So he knew exactly where or how we'd have to place our hand if, you know, something was to sort of come out of it, or like, or so he was the one helping with, in a way, the mapping, you know, the visual mapping. And then, but yeah, I've never asked him, but it must be an alter ego of some sort.
So this is a visually an incredible movie.
Mm.
And talking with Anders, like I learned, you know, that a lot of the set is practical effects and things like that. What I find really fascinating is like this idea of like hand placement and like body placement. Have you ever had to work with like something that was so heavy in digital effects before? And if not, what was that experience like?
Yeah. No, I haven't. So it's not always the easiest thing to do, because, you know, again, so much of it is left to the imagination. But I have to say they were extremely good at explaining the visuals in a way, so you could start to kind of make it out somehow. And indeed, we did have, like, you know, the interior of the spaceship that was an actual set. Like, there's a lot of, they did amazing, like the set designers did amazing work. And we did have some locations that were indeed, you know, that we had something to kind of feed off from in an atmosphere sense, you know, because the interior of the spaceship, or the interior of the heart, you know, where when my character at the end sort of traps him inside this kind of like red room, that was an actual room as well. Well, it's set actually in a studio, so there were some elements that kind of gave us an idea of what the atmosphere would be like, and everything else was very much just letting them guide us essentially. But I think what I struggled with a lot was, I was just like, I need to understand why I'm doing these things, you know? And I think, and I mean, they know, because I've joked about this with them a lot as well, but I think, you know, they had such a clear idea of like how the whole thing was going to turn out. But us as actors, there are sometimes certain things that you need in a storytelling sense to actually know what it is that you're doing with those movements, you know? And a lot of things, I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but okay, fine. Like, but it was a bit, you know, so I kind of struggled with that. Uh, so yeah, I think a lot of things, Anders and I were kind of walking through this thing, or the other actors too, just going like, okay, we're not too sure, but let's just try, you know? So yeah. But yeah, like I said, they were, you know, the costumes and enough of the sets for us to definitely pick up on the atmosphere of the visuals. And we did do some work in green screen as well, you know. I have done some work in green screen before, but not to that extent, no.
So, you know, with, you know, the kind of confused and like difficult nature of it, because like this is a mind piece, like this movie is just completely about blowing you away.
Mm.
What was the experience like of seeing the film for the first time, you know, with all of the stuff that they've added to it? Like how did that experience go for you?
Yeah, so we watched it on big screen, you know, which obviously is a great thing if you get a chance, because then you really kind of dive into it. And I found it like incredible, actually. And I found it very moving, which is what's I didn't really expect, actually, because I think there's something very sensual about the film as well, you know. And then there's this symbolism of the women at the heart, and like, and again, like I said, because, you know, there were definitely some things that we couldn't quite picture. And even in terms of like the meaning of the story at times, you know, there were definitely parts of it that felt obscure to me. Like when I was asking about my character when we were prepping, they're like, well, she's like a heart. And I was like, what does that mean? What do you mean she's a heart? Like, she's called Corey. Okay, fine. She's the core. She's the core of the universe. I was like, how the hell do you play the core of the universe? Like, I don't know. You know, so there's all these kind of like elements that in a way, well, definitely come to life when they're, you know, when it's finally all put together and when you sort of see the visual. But in a way, it's almost more like, yeah, it's like a sensory experience, I felt, to watch it. And I found it very, like, quite, yeah, quite moving. I don't know, something about it. Like it sort of takes you on this trip, and then the vibe of it. And I was just like, oh wow. And then of course I'm very critical of my work, and so that's yet another thing. So that I find hard to watch, you know. But the movie, yeah, I think I've not seen something like that in a very long time, actually. And I found it like really refreshing. Yeah. Um, yeah. Like I genuinely like it. I think it's really spectacular. Yeah.
So when I ask my wife to watch things on Shudder with me, she usually says no, because I'm typically trying to get her to watch some like trashy garbage, right?
Yeah.
So it took me like a couple weeks of like
People,
convincing. I
yeah.
was like, please, you got to watch this movie. It's so incredible. Like it's going to
Mm,
blow you away. You like science fiction. This is like pure science fiction. It's not scary. It's super
mm,
weird, but it's not scary. And
yeah.
so when I finally convinced her to watch it, we sat down, we watched the whole thing. Like, this by now it's like the fourth time I'd seen it or something like
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
she got finished with it, and she's like, "Wow, what an incredible commentary on like feminism." I was like,
Mm,
"Yeah, like that's
mm,
very real." And like so much of the movie is wrapped up in like symbols and ideas and concepts with like very little dialogue. And I think that's a big part of what makes this movie special. Like, what are some of the themes that you like personally take away from this movie?
yeah. I mean, it's nice, maybe Anders has already told you, I don't know if you've interviewed the directors but, there's been sometimes mixed responses about that, because people have gone like, oh yeah, but there's all these naked women. Why? Like, it's yet again a male director and naked bodies or whatever. But, being a female in the film industry, and I've been in it for a very long time, like, you definitely on the other end of like, well, you're definitely on the end of a lot of this kind of like sexism and like and all of this. And I really, when I saw when I met them and when I read the script, and I was like, no, there's really something feminist about what they're trying to do, and they're doing it through some of the mediums or cliches of the sci-fi genre, or some of the cliche type of like, like the male character that Anders plays, he's like the ultimate misogynist, and like, and so they're kind of playing around with that. It's like ironic in places, um but indeed it's just like, it I would think, that the feminist themes are definitely like the right reading, or certainly the way I read it too, where it's really something about like the souls and the heart and the core of, of the universe, being the woman, and like, and kind of reclaiming that. um uh um yeah. And again, again, when I first read the script, because everything is just highly symbolic, I was like, okay, you can feel, and talking to the director, this is what it's about, amongst other things, because again, it's also this visual experience. And um but yeah, I would say, well, anyway, am I answering your question? Like,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Um, it's a very international cast. There's a lot of people from all sorts of different places, and
Mhm.
I understand that like a lot of the crew is international from all over Europe and even the States and stuff. What's it
Yeah.
like working with like such a large like multinational group of people? Like, were there breakdowns in communication and things like that?
Um, I've had that experience before on a TV show that was, well, actually, more and more you have co-productions and stuff to get stuff made. So in my experience, is becoming also a bit more common to have people from all over the place. Personally, I think it always creates like a really great environment, because the more differences there are, in a way, the less kind of like indirect competition we all are with one another, or something, or like it just creates like a really nice vibe, I think. um and then I guess, actually, I don't know, because they crowdfunded it. I don't know if some of the people who got involved and was maybe linked with that too. Like, I'm not sure how everybody got involved. But wait, what was the second part of your question? You asked me. You said, what was it like working with a multinational cast? And what was the second thing you asked me?
Like, were there like breakdowns? Like, did you ever have moments where you're like, I don't know what's going on right now?
Yeah, breakdown in communication. I mean, for me, it's fine. Like, I think they were sometimes, like, perhaps like with the directing side of it. I mean, I'm bilingual, or I speak several languages actually, but I'm bilingual French English, and so obviously I had no problem communicating with the directors who are French, but I think sometimes perhaps their vocabulary was slightly limited, and then Anders didn't get it, and then I found myself going in between, and I was just like, it was quite funny at times. Like, yeah, so there was a little bit of that going on. But we got by, we managed. Yeah.
So, I read a lot of French science fiction comic books,
Mm.
and I, like Mobius and
Yeah.
Drouillet, whose name I'm sure I'm massacring because I'm American, so I only
No, you're
speak one
fine.
language. I'm awful. And a lot of the visuals of this movie seem to be drawn from a lot of the visuals in French comic books, and there's a very like French sensibility to the movie. Like when you look at other French films, like they don't rely necessarily on dialogue all the time. They definitely rely on visuals a lot more than American films do. How do you feel like this movie kind of fits into like French cinema overall?
Yeah. So I can't speak for those references of the French sci-fi books comics, because I have to say I'm not really that familiar with that art actually. But I mean, it's unusual actually to have a sci-fi film made in France because, well, sci-fi costs a lot of money to make usually, and these guys, really did very well with what they had because they're so creative and so clever, and they worked very, very hard. But it's quite rare for there to be sci-fi in France, and in fact, they didn't manage to get the kind of like conventional funding that you'd get, and like it's not a genre that's ever being really filmed. There's always this assumption that that's what America does, and America does it very well, you know. But these guys are really into sci-fi. They wanted to do whatever project they wanted to do. They were going to find a way to do it their own way without the regular funding, without the conventional funding. They figured it out. They crowdfunded it, and I suppose where it fits in, so in so many ways, it doesn't fit in French cinema in an industry sense at all. Like they're completely kind of anti-establishment in that sense. They just really did their own thing. But indeed, there is something, yeah, in the visual, there's a sensuality. There's perhaps like a way of narrating or a storytelling where there isn't a formula to their narration in any way. They're kind of actually in so many ways very experimental with their storytelling, and I think perhaps in that sense it may fit in an aspect of French cinema in that we do have a tendency to try and explore that sometimes a little bit more. I mean, there's also the very big mainstream stuff in France that can be very formulaic as well, but cinema is definitely such a huge cultural has such a huge cultural place in France, and if anything, it's one of the art forms that's, I would say, the most developed. I live in England. In London, it's really all about music or whatever, or like, certain countries have their thing, and of course I'm generalizing, but I think in France, like, cinema is really at the core of everything, artistically, culturally. And so, they would perhaps fit into that kind of constant research that there is in France to kind of like come up with storytelling devices that may not be like the one you've seen the week before, So in that sense, I think that's where they belong. And then, like I said, on the other hand, them having done a sci-fi on their own, and their own devices, completely outside the system, is like not seen before,
They're kind of like the Robert Rodriguez of France, like.
Yeah, yeah,
and,
exactly. And I
uh,
think they're so talented, and I wish them well, and I hope, and I'm sure they will continue doing great and greater things. Like, yeah,
yeah. um,
yeah.
so kind of speaking about music a little bit,
Hmm.
Carpenter Brute did all the music for the movie, which is incredible. Did you have the opportunity to see the video that they did together before they made the movie? And did that kind of prepare you for what was coming when you actually saw the movie?
Yeah. So they did indeed like send it to me. That was, when they very initially got in touch, like that's definitely something they sent me. And so I watched it and I thought it was really cool. The music is great as well. So I was like, yeah, yeah, there was another stamp of validation of going, yeah, these guys are good. Like, okay, let's go. Yeah.
So as we're kind of nearing the end of our time, like I know because of the global pandemic, there's a lot of people that don't have a lot of things going on, but I always like to give people the opportunity to tell us, what's next, what's coming up for you. And if there's nothing coming up for you, what would you be excited about doing again or like moving on into?
Um, well, it has been a funny time, hasn't it, to kind of like reflect or slow down or like, or, there's been all sorts, but miraculously, I've been offered to do a film in September, October in Italy. Nothing to do with blood machines. It's a story about that's set in, well, partially in the Second World War, and then the second part all in Italy, and then the second part in America, actually, after the war. But I was very surprised that this was happening. I sort of thought like all productions would be postponed until 2021 or something, but so far, fingers crossed, it seems to be going ahead. So I should be working on this like, yeah, in September, October. And otherwise, I think what I'd be excited about redoing, I think what I really, really want to do is start telling my own stories as well, So I've had some time off when nothing was happening in the industry, also just helped me recenter and go, okay, this is what I want to do. And so, yeah, I think acting is an amazing profession, and it's my profession, and I shall continue to do it. But I think I need to develop other sides of my creativity to be a more rounded person. Like, yeah, so that's the decision.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
It'll be amazing to see, so many people lost jobs, lost their ability to do things. I lost my job and I literally just looked around my house and thought to myself, what can I just do from home? And I had to be creative and start my own thing. And I think this is going to create so many interesting creative projects from people that have never slowed down in their lives, and then realize, I really like writing, or I really like, acting, I really like directing, and end up doing something completely different because
I
they
totally
actually
agree.
had spare time, you know?
Yeah. No, it's in a bizarre, twisted way. Like those aspects of what this situation has brought us is actually kind of very valuable, And I
Mhm.
completely agree. I think I've already started to see it around me, like, or at least from creative colleagues or friends, that it's just they've just loosened up, something, or they just put things out without sort of caring what other people will think. And I'm like, wow, yeah, that is the way to go, 100%. Like, yeah. So hopefully we can continue on that, keep that feeling with us and carry on that way, because it's a healthier way, I think. Yeah.
It is, for sure. As we're wrapping up, can you let our fans know how they can find you online so they can make sure
I
to watch the amazing things that you make?
well, I'm on Instagram, but I'm so bad at it. I've probably posted about 35 things in like 3 years or something. It's like it doesn't come natural to me, but I am on it, and I do write to people on it as well, actually. And I'm not against it. And I have a Facebook, but man, that's really bad. Okay, write to me, or or you can get in touch on Instagram, and I'll do my best to expand my social media a little bit to be a bit more accessible. But yeah, I'll try. I promise.
Some of the most some of the most famous actors in the world don't have social media for a reason. Like it can be super toxic. We just have to keep track of the people that we like, and sometimes that's easier to just do on your own. So well,
True.
Eliza, thank you so much for your time. Again, this is my favorite movie of the year so far. Like it has blown my mind completely. So thank you again. We really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. And yeah, again, thanks for having us.
Of course. Really quick before I let you go, can I get an ad bump from you? Just, your name from Blood Machines, and you're listening to Thinking Outside the Long Box.
So can you, what do you mean? Like, so I just say like, this is Elisa, what do you mean? Like, this is Elisa Lasowski, and then
from Blood Machines.
From Blood Machines.
And you're listening to Thinking Outside the Long Box.
Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Thinking Outside the Long Box.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
It's a pun about comic books.
Yeah, cool. This is Elisa Lasowski from Blood Machines, and you are listening to Thinking Outside the Long Box.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day, and I'll be looking out for your next projects.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All the best.
Thank you.